you have a preference on what we do first?
All of those sound fun.
Oh, sound fun? Okay. Let's see. Well, you know what? That song's in my head. We just listened to it, so might as well go and do that one now.
Which one?
Well, I'll actually go to the lyrics now. I'll just go read them out. But the Becoming a Jackal, we were just listening to that song. It's a song that Gianni Christina, is the camera steady?
Yes.
Okay. So Gianni Christina actually set this song. It's called Becoming a Jackal by the Villagers. And she was curious because the person who's singing it is a Naiji, and it has a very Naiji sort of thematics to it. She was wondering what it meant. She was hoping I could interpret it, being a Naiji myself. Of course, I'm not inside this individual's head, so I can't say for sure, but I can give my interpretation of these words, what they kind of say to me as I'm reading them. Okay. The most familiar room, every implement was leading to you, and your homely sense of disarray. Now, what that says to me, and especially when I read the rest of it, is the most familiar room, I think, is the simulator. It's the Nye simulator, and it does feel kind of like a room you go to, and then when you're in there, it throws you about. As I mentioned before, like where the wild things are, you kind of go to the simulator, and whoa, and then you end up somewhere, kind of like Quantum Leap, or was that show with Scott Bakula, whatever. But yeah, so then I'm here, and then I'm this character, and I have to figure shit out, and you know, it's pretty wild. However, as much of a homely sense of disarray, that is my home. My home is a place that when I go inside there, it teleports me and warps me and throws me around. That's home. So yes, it's home and it's in a state of disarray all the time, but there is a familiarity to it. That's what's funny is, for a Naiji, it's very familiar and it feels very comforting, which is kind of going to the rest of the song here, coming out from that. It's this song is talking mainly about Nye and G. So Christina, that's what the song is about. It's about the uneasy relationship that Naiji have between their source Nye and their tandem G. And that sounds so cold and clinical. That's why I like to use these kinds of examples, because it really brings the passion to it and give it flesh and form. Never once the same, always rearranged, but things would never change in the scene between the window frame. That is the compound relationship that I've mentioned that Nye, for Naiji, always has with G. It's discernment power. It's subjective discernment power. What that says to me is, never once the same, always rearranged. That's Nye. That's pure perception. It's never the same because it's always unfolding. The mystery's unfolding. More information, more information. However, but things would never change in the scene between the window frame. I take the window frame to mean, as I've often said, there's like a lens Nye has, but it would just be an open infinity pool which you can't hold if there wasn't some frame. So some people frame with Z, you could also frame with G. When you frame with G, there is a feeling that you're watching things unfold, and it has to do with sort of a natural law algorithm or story, and as you're looking at it, it kind of seems like that's the same. Like actually, it's very repetitive, as if you've already seen this many, many times before in the simulator. And so you're observing it, you're going, interesting. I don't think I've even interacted with that yet, because we're still at the lens phase, but I know it. And I hate to say this way, but I think with the term becoming a jackal, I think it's good to say, there's even a little bit of boredom and contempt for it. It's sort of like, the game. It's a game. And G is, if you think dynamics of Z or G in game terms, then you can. So it's kind of like, oh, there's this game that's been going on. Why do I notice that? That's one thing that comes up here. Where the jackals preyed on every soul, where they tied you to a pole and stripped you of your clothes. Now, I don't want to sound melodramatic, and I didn't make these words up. This is this person's words. But if you watch the other videos talking about the Naiji and their unique peak pathway and that uneasy relationship with the village. The village that I have this intimate understanding of, remember the metaphor I used? Which is, I'm coming back from somewhere I'm not aware of. That's a disarray. I'm always coming back from some place and I'm always confused and I'm trying to figure shit out. Which is why Nye often make really good detectives, because you have no choice. But then there was, remember, my concern about the tribe or people being cool. That's what this is. He's basically saying, as many Naiji feel, I'm really aware of this G thing, but I gotta tell you, this G thing seems to be about a game of animals. Humans being... It's the game I mentioned that Naiji often talk about, which is that we're all basically primates in clothes. It's that. It's noticing, wow, we're animals, and I think it's why the use of the term jackal. There's a feeling that as animals go, you would hope that we would be something spiffy. I'm not saying jackals aren't spiffy, because I'm aware that other, places in the world, different times, that, different races have different opinions of those things and totems, and I'm totally cool with that. So I'm just stating how I think this person probably meant that, which is jackals was not his highest choice of animal. And the way this thing strikes me is jackal is not the greatest, which is the way a lot of Naiji feel, which is, for humans being the most advanced species, we don't treat each other very well. We seem very rough. We seem, a metaphor I often use with Ninja, I talk about wolves and their pack behavior, and as savage as it may seem, actually, they cut each other both physically and psychologically far less than humans do. But humans have better technology. So, as a Naiji are painfully aware of that we're rocking better technology, but are we just trying to be mean? I think that's where the jackal things come in, because it seems like all that brilliance of humanness has been turned to being more brilliantly mean. Using this heightened gamesmanship that we have basically for the lowly things, just for getting ahead, cutting corners, opportunist. Being an opportunist, and a lot of Naiji can feel this way, and I think Nija, I've also mentioned this the same way too. It comes with having perception over the value space, is the feeling that you're seeing all these options, all these things you could be doing. And obviously, I'm gathering that probably that's what he's seeing. He's seeing that through the window, and more than likely also he's probably interacting with it some, and that is his interpretation of G dynamics. They're dangerous. That's one thing that's very interesting about Naiji, and why a lot of Naiji, because I know a lot of you are asking this, how come so many of them mistake themselves for some sort of Zai mojo? There's a lot of reasons I mentioned the wildness of the Nai, but here's another reason too, which is Naiji are so acutely aware of G, they often are really bothered by it. That's the funny thing, is it's a strong power, but the strength of it actually turns into being extremely aware of how much you don't like how people do shit. That's the way. So this sounds very counterintuitive, but especially the people who have had this happen, they're overmodulating with their Zai, is there's a feeling that I can't be that because I dislike it so. Zai Alpha, because I think one of Kendo's questions, this actually kind of brings up here, is what's the difference between a Zai Alpha and a Naiji with a lot of Zai? That's one thing. Zai are mainly annoyed at humans bothering them. That's the dispassion. Their dispassion is a higher signal. A Naiji who's turned Zai on is a different animal altogether. It's someone who's actually a voyeur. Someone who's a watcher of humans, who finds them, much to their own dismay, interesting. They do. Most Naiji tend to be really into, even though not to say the arts or things like that or humanities, they tend to be very aware of what people are doing, pop culture. And it's for that reason is, why do humans do that? I mentioned that, people often think it's funny, like there was this author, who I won't mention right now, but people were talking about this person, and I didn't think what they were doing, or the stories they were telling, seemed extremely interesting to me. But I don't fall for peer pressure. It was not actually peer pressure, it was actually interest. I became curious after enough people were talking about it. It's like, okay, I need to read it just because I want to know why, and it did not work on me. The spell this book cast on them did not work on me. My detachment was still fine. But when I was reading it, I was able to go, that's why it affects them so. Naiji are like that. They need to be able to explain, which this thing here, this song, why is it like this? Why does it work this way? Why do I find it so fucking interesting? Particularly if I find it to be jackal-like. Why do I find a jackal-like dance so interesting? That's kind of perplexing. Because most Naiji, why a lot of them think they're Zai mojos, they go with, you know what, these humans are really annoying and I don't like dealing with them, so I'm going to kind of, boom. But there's still this fascination with them. You'll not find that with the Xi Alpha as much. Not that they can't fetish with Xi and be into theater and so forth, which they can be, and successfully so, but it's a question of fascinating. The fascination with the bubble made by other humans, because I think it's why also the use of the jackal, which is why I use the wolf. It's a pack animal. That's the crucial thing. In this case, he's used to the jackal is kind of like a low version of when I talk about the wolf, which is we're pack animals. It's so obvious that we are, and yet we don't operate any better than jackals. That seems kind of troubling. And I wish I could ignore it. So those are two things. Nai over Xi is I'm seeing Xi from over here. I'm seeing Xi through a window. I'm looking at Xi. I'm watching it play out, and I'm like, it's odd. I don't know why they do it like that. But then you think to yourself, why do I note it through a window, and how come I keep looking? If I find it to be jackal-like, how come I keep looking? It makes you feel weird. Okay, this continues. I was a dreamer, staring at windows, out onto the main street, because that's where the dream goes. And there's your answer, ladies and gentlemen. The compound relationship. Because even when I go inside my Xi comes with me. Like we've often talked with you, it's very difficult for people to understand objective and subjective without the compound relationship. Otherwise, you think a person actually lives out here or lives in there. It doesn't work like that. You're just at one side of the ocean or the other. So when I go inside, even though I'm in my native shore, I'm still getting influx from Xi, because that's how the Nai world is built. That's how the lens is built. So, where is it? Oh, because that's where the dream goes. So when the Nai starts to look out through the glass, whether it wants to or not, it notices the human dance. Even finds it ugly. Now, this is key. I don't think the human dance is ugly, but it can be. It definitely can be. And so, and it's definitely uglier. This is true. It can be, and it is uglier than it should be. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. So if you're looking out there, you're like, that's troubling. And apparently, it's important to me. And this is where a lot of them boot up Xi, huge. If they don't write songs like this, they boot up Xi, which is, you know what, screw those people. Really, I don't like dealing with them. I prefer to deal with books. I prefer to deal with science. I prefer to deal with comics. I have very good Xi, but that's because, and I could have not, that's important, because I went through a long period of time growing up, which I have almost no memory of, but I had very few friends, if any, and I spent most of my time in my room. But one of the reasons I had good Xi is I watched a lot of movies, and they would act the scenes out. But if I hadn't done that, I probably could easily thought I was a Xi mojo, because I really spent most of my time just reading and did very little talking. Does that make sense? So at this point, he's doing this. And that's why he's going to all of a sudden turn into an artist who can write songs. And like, how that happened? Because mainly he just stares. He's a starer. But he keeps staring at people because they're fascinating. They are, so he's come to terms with, they are his subject material. There's going to be. That is the subject of his art. That's just it. Even if it's ugly. Apparently his psyche has chosen that's a subject material. Like a person chooses Vietnam, or they choose Canada, or they choose anything, they're like, that's my subject. And no matter if it was ugly in the past, now, or the future, that's the subject. And so that's how for Nai Xi, people are the subject, and the way they do shit, the way they did shit, the way they're gonna do shit. That's just, apparently when I look out windows, that's what I see. I see the humans dancing, and sometimes they dance like jackals. Actually, a lot of times they do, which is annoying. Here we go. So now I believe he's going to enter the fray. He's been watching, now he's going to go out in this. And why? Because it sounds funny, but this is the reason. It's so obvious, but what you stare at is what you walk towards. And he's bothered that every time he looks out a window, he's seeing the jackal dance or the human dance. So he already knows, kind of like resignedly, that when he walks out the door, he's going to be interacting with that because that's what he sees. It's hard to explain that way, unless you're Nai Xi, but if you do, this might make some sense. So now he's out there. And each time they found fresh meat to chew, I would turn away and return to you. You would offer me your unmade bed, feed me till I'm fed, read me till I'm read. This to me sounds like returning to the Nai, the home, but not just that, returning to the interpretive channel. So that sounds a lot like the other, feeding you, reading you. It takes a Nijai to read a Nai Xi. So This sounds like returning home when the G is bad, and going back to where the Nai can talk to itself, which is basically the Nai and Ni interpretive channel. However, and this is a good time to bring in the difference between the basic peak pathway and the advanced peak pathway, because you often wonder if couldn't you just go Nai to Ni? No, because you're not wired that way. That's not how the story goes. You need to earn the right to interact with that Ni by going out and talking with these people, by going out and interacting. And of course it sucks ass and you have to go back inside and then you get rewarded for what you did. But then in the end, you always have to go back out because that's your storyline. And that's why he's going to keep finding himself staring at windows no matter what. But when the morning came, you would watch me at the window again. When he says you, I think he's referring to his other. She's probably wondering, which is her job, so she's awesome, best lover ever. She's wondering, and he's wondering too, why are you staring out the window at the jackals again? Does that make sense? When the Nai is your home and I'm your lover, why do you do that? As mentioned, all your spirit forms are very powerful autonomous entities with their own agenda, and your other's agenda is stay inside with me, hang out with me, and your Nai's agenda is keep watching. However, you can't keep watching. That's what he's wrestling with here. You have to actually watch what's going on out there and let that move you to interact with it. Then learn from that experience and then do something with that knowledge. In an eyes wide open, sleeping state, staring into space with no look upon my face. So he's even left his other now, which always happens, and you return to just speculating. But once you speculate as an IG, you will look outside at the humans. That's what you do. Speculate, look at humans. I was a dreamer, staring at windows, out onto the main street, because that's where the dream goes. And when I got older, when I grew bolder, out onto the streets I flew. Released from your shackles, I danced with the jackals and learned a new way to move. So, a lot of IG live an extremely voyeuristic life early on, some of them their whole lives. So what happens is, there's a watching of this dance, a watching of what the humans are doing, and then there's a going out and interacting and getting beaten up with it. But then over time, you get to where, although you're very sensitive to it, that sensitivity is because you are G-Mojo. If you do it, the Naiji will get good at it. A lot of Naiji are surprised by that when they try public speaking or try actually talking about something they're very interested in or something. They realize, wow, I'm very persuasive. I can really talk. In fact, I like talking a lot about what I care about. So, this person now has danced with the jackals, these humans that don't act so nice, and it's learned how to best them. So now this is the next confusing part for Naiji is, A, why do I keep thinking about the humans? Particularly when I don't think very much of them. Number two is, why can't I stop thinking about that so that it keeps building in me to the point that I have to go outside and interact with them? Like, why can't I get rid of the fixation? So one, why does it start? And then why can't I make it go away? Because geez, you're tandem, dude. That's why, I'm sorry. You can't just Zion, although many a Naiji have tried, but it doesn't work that way. What else? And when I grew older, I grew bolder. As the G works, there still is incredible sensitivity, but then there comes the cunning as a Naiji learns that I'm very, very sensitive, and I have to watch out for that. But that means that I do, A, care a lot. It's important to me to do well at these human interactions, and that sensitivity lets me see things they don't see. I see that there are these humans dancing, or according to him, jackals, and they don't. They're jackals, or in my case, humans dancing, and they don't know it. I can use that. So I went from being scared of them to being in the mix of them getting beaten up but keep going back out, and now I'm starting to become a jackal master. In his case, what he thinks it is. But really what it means is you're learning how to use the sight about humans to your advantage. Ah, that feels weird. The Nejez you mentioned have a lot of roles they can play, a lot of chameleon abilities, and this is an aspect of it right here. It feels weird, particularly when you didn't think very much of the way humans did stuff. You started with, I'm watching them, I don't like the way they do it. I went out with them, they beat me up in whatever the way the world beats people up, and I didn't like that either. But I learned really fucking good, and now I can use it. Now, I don't like that about me. It's weird. or at least I don't feel good that I live in a world where that's the way it works. That bothers me. This seems to bother this person as well. Release from your shackles. Now, why do I say that? Well, because there's the shackles of the nigh, which is because it's subjective. It is a never-ending voyeurism. That is a kind of shackles, a shackles against moving. So it's why a lot of Nai-Ji can feel that they are adaptive, because Nai percolates and percolates and percolates and percolates and percolates and percolates. What's doing that? It's saying, not yet, not yet. That's a kind of shackle. So when you interact with the Ji, you actually start seeing how your speculations play out, and you can use it, and it's winning. You're like, aha! I think I know why I'm built this way, or at least I know what some of my powers are. So there's a feeling of, I don't need to stay cooped up inside anymore, which is why most Nai-Ji go through a fairly decent experimental period. As they go from just staring outside, feeling weird, like they have no friends, and they go outside, it doesn't go very well, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I think I may have figured some of this out. And they start experimenting and they start doing really well. And they're like, I wonder how far I can go with that. Some Nai-Ji need to make sure they keep their morality and check on that one, so I need an Nijai. There with their Jai to check your morality. Make sure Kodakana doesn't get whatever. Because Nai-Ji can take on so many forms, so many characters, there has to be a morality to why you're doing that. Okay, what else? So before you take this song as truth, you should wonder what I'm taking from you. So what this person's saying now is, and this may sound harsh, and like this person is feeling like a villain in some ways, but they're not. They're trying to be noble. That's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to say, this situation doesn't seem very noble to me, and it bothers me, but I'm going to try to make the best of it I can. And it's something that I often do, and it has alarmed people when they first meet me, but then they actually find it somewhat disconcertingly endearing. And that is, I often will mention flaws I have, or ways that I work that are unusual, eccentric, whatever, right off the bat. And you may be thinking, why don't you ease people into that? It's because of this. I feel like I'm holding back this knowledge because I can see this dance and others can't, and the most honorable thing I can do is try to be as upfront about my knowledge as I can be. So that's what he's doing here. So before you take this song as truth, you should wonder what I'm taking from you. He's saying, unlike what was done with me, I'm not going to just do this jackal dance and not let you know. I'm telling you that, like when I look out and get hypnotized by it, you're being hypnotized by it right now. I'm doing it. I went from being scared of it to not understanding it to being a player of it, and now I'm using this now. I hope I'm using it for good. I wonder if the way to use it for good is to tell people that you're using it. This is something I often we talk about. Like, I wonder, like, how much of what I'm doing should I tell the person? That's a big theme of this song, which is, why do I watch it? Why do I play with it? Why do I keep coming back to it? What do I do with that? Okay. How I benefit from you being here, lending me your ears while I'm selling you my fears. G is going to have a relationship dynamic to it that causes for a, not unlike Z. This department helps this department, you do this favor, I get this favor, and that's not wrong. If people play mean, it can seem very bad. It turns into like jackals vying for who gets to have the first taste of the kill, who gets to mate. It's a very ugly, brutish way. I'm not saying jackals are actually like that. I'm just saying I think that's the metaphor he's going for here, or at least alluding to. So when they say, lending me your ears while I'm selling you my fears, he's saying that I need to talk about what's inside me, my nai. And apparently I need to do it to people. Apparently when I do that, if I'm good enough, I can hypnotize you. In fact, I think you're hypnotized if you're still listening to my song. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I think you're hypnotized right now, unless you turn the song off. But even still, you're hypnotized until you got that line. And I did not turn the song off. I kept listening. So I was a dreamer. I'm selling you my fears. Staring at windows. I am selling you my fears. Out onto the main street. I'm selling you my fears, because that's where the dream goes. I'm selling you. G does sell. I mean, that's what it does. you could say, because both of the objective discernments, they move things. So Z kind of shoves, G sells. But they want that flag forward. I mean, if they're not getting it, I mean, their purpose in the psyche is opposite. That's what they do. If they're not getting that, they're like, why am I here? Come on, people. He needs to get his flag forward, which means he needs to connect with people and get them to care about his inner struggle. He needs to make these jackals care about him, but that means he's basically kind of being a manipulator himself. He's manipulating with this song to get you to be all in his artistic story. And he's hoping that maybe if I tell you I'm doing that, I'm not a bad person. And he is correct. But they're not all jackals. Well, humans can be, but they can be all sorts of other cool animals too. So that's basically the end of the song there. Does that make sense? Okay, so Christina, hopefully that helped out. How's your time?
We're at 27 minutes, and that was really awesome.
Thank you. Okay, alright. What does the feeling of processing V and Ni at the same time feel like, compared to Ni on its own and V on its own? Is this blending different from accessing V through Ni, and if so, how so? Can one consciously develop or trigger going liquidy more? What does it feel like? Well, this is something that's going to be difficult for you to understand without it being amplified. And that's because you're actually doing it right now. You're doing it all the time. And Naiji do it so prevalently that it's difficult to discern that that's different. Like meditating. Naiji meditate, they're like, am I doing it? Yes, you're doing it. We are going to give you some little ritual to try out. I think you might like this. In order to go liquidy. It's one I do myself, I'm quite fond of. And by the way, anyone can do this, so anyone who's watching this can do the same thing, and it will access your perception corridor, which is going to help you go liquidy by having synesthesia. This will be easier for those who have, obviously, perception as their top power, and for those who are interpretive. That makes it easier. Okay. I'll talk about my man, Frank Frazetta. When I look at any of his works of art, I'm staring at one of them, and obviously, there is the impactfulness of the colors, of the strokes, of the lines. That's very V. That's aesthetic. However, it's very difficult, particularly if I'm alone, if other stimulus is taken away. So that the only real sensory perception I really need to worry about is the painting and my inner thoughts on it. This will help you start. So when I look at that work of art, I just sort of become absorbed. Like right now I'm become absorbed, not in a Frank Frazetta thing, I'm being absorbed in something else. And while I stare at it, I'm going to allow myself to give myself things. And this is a power anyone can do, but being a Naiji, it's very, very easy for me. It'll be easy for you as well. Which is, I'm just going to stare at, I'll say I'm staring at, I'm staring at samurai sword. I have a samurai sword here I'm staring at. So this gives a lot of visual impact to me, just looking at that sword. Now if I just stare at it, my knives give me all kinds of things that sort of make me feel samurai-ish. So I kind of feel like I'm becoming more samurai-like. I'm in that mood. A samurai mood's coming over me. I'm going to allow that to happen. Now, a couple things you want to pay attention to in order to isolate what you're asking about is I'm going to not try to ask myself why I'm thinking that. And I'm not going to try to figure out where it's going. Also, I'm feeling my Nai just give me different things, feelings, vibes, and I'm not going to try and select any of them. That's important because I'm trying to stick with perception. So I'm just going to keep staring at it and let my thoughts come. Now I'm also speaking to you here now, but I would advise you to not do that. I'd also advise you to not have anyone around you and to make the environment as stimulus-free as possible. And just stare at, in your case, a work of art you like. I would pick anything that you like, any kind of visual art that appeals to you. I would choose that, and I would choose a selection of them. Now, you can make it random, and that's totally fine, and I usually do that myself now, but you probably want to isolate certain modes in yourself, certain moods. So, I'd go with the major rituals of the Enlightenment elevator. Let's take fear. There is a Frank Frazetta painting that has like this horde of like very primitive looking humans. And it's very, very intimidating. Now, I can easily dismiss that with my G. My G can tell me that's silly, I'm not even engaged these people for real. But I don't want to do that. I also took out my Xi command and say, well, you could do this to beat them, or you could do that, or they wouldn't catch you, and try to explain how I'd survive it. We don't want to bring the discernment into this at this point. We actually want to just let a ride take over you. But these rides actually come from often very powerful emotions, such as fear. So I'm looking at a Frazetta painting with these intimidating looking individuals, and I just stare and let the simulator begin doing what it does. I recommend staring at it for a minimum of 3 to 5 minutes. So the length of like a decent song. I also recommend that you try to get at least a handful, preferably 10 or more, different, distinct Enlightenment elevator rituals. Because when you first do it, you'll be wondering, am I doing it? And that's because it's such a natural process that you do all the time. So you're gonna have to distinguish the sort of chords on an instrument. So if I look at that intimidating one from Frank Frazetta, those primates, and then I look at, say, one of his lovely ladies who all look like Nijai, badass huntress lady, the feelings that I will get will be much different. So I will go, this is key, interesting that I feel that. You don't want to do anything with that interesting that you get, that impression of something. You just want to let it keep going. Whoever wants to go, even wants to jump somewhere else. You want to collect, interesting. As long as you're still going, interesting. That means the eye is open. The lens is open. You have not brought discernment in to try and make something out of it. Because once you do that, the ride stops. You're now, well, the ride still goes, but the rush diminishes. And so if you want to learn how to develop your powers, being a Nai-Ji, you want to learn how to turn on the Nai, in this case in a synesthesia fashion. You also want to maybe go through it one time in the same session. We go through, say, 10 or a dozen or so different artistic pieces that have very different thematics to them, but you like, or they speak to you. And then go back and see if, when you look at it the second time, still spending 3 minutes or so, on each one, and see if you can't notice where it takes you. And that's an important feeling for Nai, being Nai Alpha is a simulator. It's like a ride. It takes you somewhere. A story, an X-Men Danger Room, a Star Trek holodeck, whatever you want to call it. It happens when we just stare. Nai-Ji are born voyeurs. The more you just stare, the more your psyche will take you. Start to, after going with that first pass, I'd recommend the same day that you do that, go back and do it one more time and see if the second pass, they aren't more distinct. For example, in Frank Frazetta's works, there are many very transportive ones, there are very foreboding ones, there are very intoxicating ones. There are a lot more than that. But just with those three, say I go through those pictures and I look at each one, I'm staring, Nai and V, just lay the impact of the visual and then where my mind takes me, where my simulator takes me. There will be distinguishment between the paintings. For example, I find many of the ladies in his paintings to be very, very desirable in different ways. Physical form and the character that they are. So the character will move me. I'm not going to try to actually do anything with that, although I can interact with the story all I want, but I'm not going to try to give it meaning. If the lady jumps off the page and wants to have sex with you, man, rock on. But I'm just saying, don't try to give meaning to it, just go with it. That will ensure that you're getting as much perception as you can. Discernment's always going to be there, but that will help you isolate. I would then say, revisit it. revisit that ritual I just told you about at least 2 days later, up to 2 weeks later. That'd be the range I'd go with. In that interim time, what you're going to find is that last synesthesia you were doing was V heavy, even though you're an IG, which means the Ni is still above the V because you're an IG. That didn't change. But the activity was focusing on a V that was pleasing to your Ni, while limiting all other sensory impact as best you can, and reducing your discernment impact as best you can. That's what you did there. Now, there's another kind of synesthesia, which is actually your dominant kind, which happens all the time for you, but you may not realize it. But this will help you realize it after that last ritual. The rides will continue. If you keep trying to touch in your mind those simulations that came to you when you looked at those paintings, those graphic artwork, there will be a continuing of that story. When you think about that story, you're now mainly doing Ni. It's pretty much all in your head. You're walking around your neighborhood or something, you're sitting in the toilet, driving your car, you're mainly in your head. Not the car. Somewhere you won't drive and hit something. Okay, but you're mainly using Ni, but when you do that, there's going to be input from that remembrance of those paintings. So let's say I'm walking down the street. If I just spent, say 2 days ago, an hour to 2 hours of staring at Frank Frazetta paintings, my favorite dozen, and I spent that hour, 2 hours in a ritualistic fashion staring at each one for about 3 minutes or so. There's no way that my mind as an IG won't start continuing that ride that was started there. But that means when I step away from them, where's the V coming from? This gets to talk about objectivity versus extroversion. Extroverting is just going outward, but big objective actually means being oriented to the outward. It doesn't mean you have to go outward. Like Ni can be used inwardly to abstract inside itself with objective abstractions. The same thing happens here with V for an IG. As a story continues to percolate, perhaps you imagine yourself running away from the formidable thing and getting away from them, or maybe you imagined fighting them and beating them, maybe you imagined having a wonderful coitus with one of the lovely ladies. If you have those kinds of visions in your head, that's going to make an impact. So over the days that happen after that, your mind, unless the world yanks you, and if you also don't give any active effort to touchstone it, it can drift back under the surface, but that should rise at the surface. If you take the 12 most impactful visual arts that you can find for yourself and stare at them for like 3 minutes or so each, and then do it twice, yeah, over the next few days, for any human, but definitely an IG, if you limit the other stimulus, you limit discernments, you limit people interacting with you that can take you out of your headspace, you will continue those sort of visions, and you'll be given V that came from what you saw originally, but now the simulator is just going to play with it and throw it around. That's synesthesia too. In fact, that's the more powerful form of you. If you were to go to a concert, or in my case, go to a movie I liked, the amount, I think most people feel this to some extent, but Naiji feel this tremendously. The amount of mental activity that will come from a 2-hour movie for an IG will far exceed 2 hours. So if you watch a movie like The Matrix and you really liked it and you never seen anything like that before, that movie lasts 2 hours, but a IG simulator will run Matrix things and what that would mean, and what if real life was a Matrix, and all that. That's synesthesia too, these what if questions, and it's bringing in the V from the movie to help run the simulator without seeing the movie anymore. So going to a movie and just drinking it in, that's synesthesia for an IG, especially if when you're watching the movie, you don't let your G get in the way. It's not unlike mojo reading. You don't let your G do anything except make a lens for you. Otherwise, it tries to make the movie something, tries to make the concert something, and that limits your Ni from actually drinking in what it is. So when you go to a movie, I think we all know this, you kind of like release your shackles, your discernment locks, and you kind of just drink it in, unless something about the movie kind of may disturb your morality or something like that, or Xi or Z disturbs your logic. You're like, oh, and then takes you out of the dream. Okay, so basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to suspend disbelief and not let discernments come in. After this happens, you want to reach out to that. You want to remember that ritual you had the day before or 2 days before. Excuse me. And see what your brain gives to you, and it will. And once it does give something to you, it will give you faith in yourself, which is the only faith that Power Theory asks you to have, is in your configuration, the fact that your powers will do what they do, and particularly that your source power will always give you stuff. So if you're an IG and you do that kind of V-heavy synesthesia ritual, over the days after that, you will actually get a heightened activity. Lock on to that. Hold on to that, nurture that, and recognize it, that it's actually happening. That will let you call on it more in the future. When you are envisioning that, you're going to find that your brain, your psyche, your synomnia as a Naiji naturally wants to give it some sort of epic story. This is how Naiji actually be a great scientist too, is to do with the cosmos, trying to make some epic meaning out of it. What will happen is, after you have given a period of time and you've allowed your brain to do that, your brain is going to probably put the pictures in not exactly, or graphic art, the same way you look at them. Your Nai is now going to tell you in its knowing way that they should go like this. That's going to weird you out at first, but that's the way Nai works. That's really cool. It's got natural law programming, so when you arranged it, you were doing the best you could, trying to bring in as much Nai as you could. But then once you leave, pure Nai as best it can, or as much pure as it can be in a compound relationship, is working on the problem. And it will start to make suggestions, if you keep your mind open, to a more way I could have done that. It'll happen. Your Zai will actually help this too, but don't overdo it. You're going to bring your Zai in later on, like the 5th pass. Right now, you're just going to let the Nai almost relive, simulate the ritual you did before, but allowing it to change the way you did it. And it will, with like a mind of its own. The Nai will decide, you know what, if I had to do that again, we should have done it like this. And more than likely, it's probably going to suggest that you expand the graphic art you chose, and also suggest that, if not that, and or, to replace some of the ones you did. They didn't hit you as much as some of them did. And that made the ride a little like this. Your Nai will say, you know what, take out this one, and you forgot, this is where Nai actually works with Vi. It constellates. It says, if you take out graphic art A, B, and F, and replace with these other 3 ones that you forgot about from your childhood or that time you went to Japan or something like that, then it will make a better, more awesome ritual. That's abductive reasoning, which Nai does. It's going to bring in material that you hadn't thought of to make it better, more full. That's your second time. You then do the ritual again, but you do the way your Nai suggests to you that you do it. The first time you do it, you kind of choose. You pick the paintings or whatever, and you line them up, and then you go through and you stare at them. Even the first time you do it, when you go back to the second pass, decide before you go through it if you want to rearrange them, if you want to go through the same order you did before, or if maybe you would prefer a different ordering of them. This is what artists do when they make their albums. When they do their songs, they don't know what order they're going to go to. It's not until after the songs get more developed, they start moving the songs around, they decide if someone was going to listen to all 16 tracks, what would be the order to go in. So that's what you're doing. You're kind of initially massaging and artistic inspiration tracks for you. That's what we think. You're kind of making an album of inspiration. At this point, it's visual. The second pass, you're now going to allow the percolation, the suggestions of the Nai to improve the way you did it before. Again, like the first time, after you do that, allow percolation. It will give you more, particularly if you honored it. If you did the ritual like you did the first time, which honored it, and then you honored what it says to you after you did that, and implement that, it will give you more. So what's going to happen next? I want you to then imagine going through those works of art again, staring at them for 3 to 5 minutes each, and you're going to start noticing the story gives to you, the simulation it gives to you, and the simulation for a Naiji in particular is very all-encompassing. So it's going to want more, kind of like a director for a movie. It wants more resources to fill it out. You're like, fill out what? We don't know yet. Was it Miles Davis? I think. First I'll play it for you, and then I'll tell you what it was. He doesn't know until after he did it. That's what it's going to be here, which is why that's why Nye often doesn't feel directive. It's very directive, it just doesn't know what its move's going to be until after it gets the answer, which takes a while. So, your Nye is now going to fill in more phenomena, but we want to focus on the synesthesia part, which I believe was your question. So what you want to do here is music. After the second ritual of doing that, you're now going to imagine doing it for a third time. By the third time, you're again going to go through. Again, you're going to probably, in the interim, think of maybe more artwork you could choose, more you could take away, make it more perfect, and also the ordering. But now you're also going to add in a song. You're going to choose a song that just your Nye feels would go with that. When you go and do that, you'll repeat it like you did the last one, which is after the music, see what comes to you afterwards, and then on the fourth ritual, you will take the suggestions of your Nye for improved music, change of order, change of tracks of the art, the visual art, to make for a fourth, more perfect one. The fifth part of this ritual will be to now begin to bring in your synesthesia. You're going to do it again, but now what you're going to do is you're going to choose improve music, change music, whatever, if your spirits want that, your synesthesia wants that, and then also the artwork, the ordering of it, which ones, do they stay, do they go, do you add to that? But you're going to add in something else, location. Where should I do it? You don't watch movies just anywhere. It's usually a special room. In fact, if you go to theater, it's a special dark room with a big screen. Why? It's better. You could watch that on your iPhone. You could watch it on a small TV or the big screen. If you had your choice, most people would watch it on the big screen. Why? It's better. Okay, so allow your synesthesia to pick. Before we were going with you're looking at the work of art, you're listening to music, allowing your simulator to run, and other than that, limiting other stimulus. Trying to basically be in like a white wall room so it doesn't get in your way. But now we're going to try something else. We're not going to try and white wall it, we're going to try and make it good. So maybe you want to go out on a long walk. Maybe you want to go on a car ride. Maybe you want to, not car ride, but a long walk, or maybe you want to go someplace that's different, a different building than you've ever been to before, or just any place that's scenic, maybe the beach. Who knows? I don't know. I don't want to give you too much because I don't want to influence you. Just wherever feels like a better place to do it that would make it special. Not like in just your room or something where you probably were doing the initial rituals. In my case, I would say I'm going to go out in the woods now with my Frank Frazetta paintings, my little posters rolled up. I got my iPhone with the different music out there, and I'm going to listen to it and do it the way I did the fourth ritual. But here's the difference. I'm going to come prepared to write down, and I'm going to tell my synesthesia, my phenomena, my spirits that I have listened to their call these 4 times, and now I'm going to begin to attempt to grasp a bit what they're saying to me. And this is said with reverence and respect, so they'll keep giving me stuff. So you go out in the woods, and you're there, and you're looking at the artwork, you're playing the music, and just whatever comes to you, start jotting things down. Don't try and write it in full sentences. Don't try and make it neat or anything. Just, if it comes as scribble, any form that comes out, but just try to get some form to it. When you try to give it any form like this, that means that the discernment has kicked in. Did that answer it? Okay. I have watched through the spirit forms and peeking videos and have been reading as much of the info on this topic as possible, but I still don't really understand how I can start concrete training towards this. Going through your conscious powers is how you get to the inspirational energy, but it's a bit more complex than that. And I think that maybe is a lesson saved for another day, because long story short, there's a way of speaking to your psyche. And once you do that, there is the conscious sequencing, which is how you are able to speak to it. But once you're able to speak to it, there's more of a spirit companion vibe that you can call out to and talk to, or stations, departments. That makes you feel, that thing makes you feel too weird, but it's still things you can dialogue with and bring in their help if you know how to call to them, what energetic things you need to do in order to get them to come to you. You're going to get that in this ritual I just gave you. By keeping out the discernment for as long as you're going to do there until the 5th ritual, not only is it going to give you a lot of Ni and V, but like I said, that is just one corridor of perception. If you keep doing that and doing things that are interesting to the Ni, your Ni will turn on tremendously. Your inspirational genius will be very, very happy that you took time out of your day to pick a selection of the most interesting graphic art you could do, and then arrange them and ponder on what it means and what you want to do next, and then you actually put music to it, you go to some special exotic location. Okay, your other is going to eat that up. So that is a very concrete way of actually getting into your powers without just going Ni, Ji, Zai, V. It doesn't go like that, except you have to learn that's how you gear up, how you power up, kind of like an airplane. There's a certain sequence you have to do to get the plane in the air. Once in the air, it can do all kinds of maneuvers. You know what I mean? Like a dazzling array of things, almost infinite, because you're in the air. There's not an infinite number of ways of taking off or landing. Those things you kind of have to have like a procedure for. So this will help teach you how to start dialoguing with your Ni, and when you dialogue with your Ni and the perception corridor that much, you will be talking to your other. You'll be talking to the Ni. On top of Zhai poignancy, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing Zhai moaning correctly, and would love to hear additional nuanced descriptions of it. In general, how do I tell the difference between Ji acting beta and caretaking versus versus Zhai? Teaching. With Ji moans too, but there's a way of trying to articulate with it, like, what's it saying? That's saying, I don't know. To who? You. As opposed to, I talked to Christine, she goes, that's her. That's a big difference, is that the moaning, both Zhai and Ji moan because they're kind of emotional, but the difference is, we often mention Zhai moaning because it's kind of doing it for itself. It does not have, now this may take some effort for you to learn, because having Ji on your strong side, you're going to find the poignancy of Zhai calls to you. So for you, it may feel like it's talking to you. But in general, Zhai is not talking to be heard. It's simply doing it. A good example of that is what I call the right side rictus. It looks funny, but long story short is when the system is heavily exerted, for example, lifting a very heavy weight, that's subjective discernment, handling massive amount of stress or impact. And so that comes out in the moaning. Impact. You're taking impact. I even moan sometimes with Zai. Doesn't sound like emotional, it sounds more like a machine gun. Like stupid humans. Okay, but it's sort of like a kind of gears grinding. And that's what that sounds like. As opposed to Ji and Z have more of a, it projects. That's a big one. A downward quality you've mentioned often, as opposed to a forward. So back and down, as opposed to forward and up. What are some nuanced signs I can use to tell the difference between Zai strongly suppressing Ji versus, I think I mentioned that, is that true Zai unflappability is disinterested. There is a hunter vibe that Naiji never lose. Even they go faux zen, they're like this, they're still staring at you like that. Hey, you know, whatever. True Zai Alpha will get bored with humans. That's one thing I notice in Naiji don't tend to do. They can look icy cold, but say someone like Richard Dawkins. Very cold. A lot of people probably think that person's a Zai Alpha, but not if you watch them, like a hawk. Eyes on the opponent, eyes on the prey, eyes on the chase.